Did you see this article? 85 people sickened by THC at a Wisconsin pizza parlor. They used marijuana-infused oil for dough preparation. I mean, this is like a lead scene from Dumb and Dumber. Welcome to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. I'm your host, Scott Cates, coming to you live from the northeast Georgia mountains and the tiny town of Tiger. Yeah, back in Tiger. I know some of you are probably trying to make sense still of last week's joke about driving through Illinois and it being literally vacant, the whole state. But we came, really, I've been gone for a little bit. I was gone for about 10 days. Had gone to Iowa, and as I was headed to Iowa, we went into Illinois, and they had not cut the grass on the interstate. It probably was waist high, chest high probably in some areas. And so no actual maintenance had been done on the interstate in forever. And so as we came through there, there was a point in time, too, there were very few cars on the road. And it looked like a scene from Chernobyl, Pripyat or something like that. Just like an abandoned interstate is what it really looked like coming through there. Later, I asked my brother-in-law, I said, what in the world? Looks like everyone vacated, just literally left Illinois. And he said, they don't have any money. They're out of money to actually take care of those projects and those things. And yet, as you went through Illinois, it was amazing. I went through Illinois. Gas was like $4.06 a gallon in some areas that we passed through, which was a far cry from the $2.59 we'd come out of in other states. But the taxes were so high on gasoline there. So it was an interesting move. So that's what I was trying to make a joke out of that and didn't go anywhere last week. Last week was kind of a crazy week for me anyway. Or 2 weeks ago, last Monday, I could barely talk. Allergies had killed me, and I'll explain that in a minute. But meanwhile, today in Tiger, it's gorgeous. It really is nice. The last few days have been incredible. We're talking about low 70s. I think the high yesterday was right at 70, 71. And at night, it's been in the low 50s. Which means everything in our area is freaked out. Right now, as I'm looking to you, looking right out the window right at this second, I'm looking up, and some leaves are already changing. Which means those of you that are absolutely into pumpkin spice everything, this is your season. And it started early for you. So I have a few friends that, and a few people that used to be friends, that are that were into pumpkin spice everything. And so it's interesting. This would be the time of year for you. And it's coming well right now. I'm thinking to myself, that warm cinnamon smell and, something warm, that warm cinnamon beverage is going a long ways. Matter of fact, the opening sequence for this podcast, it took me about 5 times before I had enough voice. And then only am I able to speak to you today because of a cup of coffee and a fisherman's friend. And we'll see how long that actually lasts. Yeah, well, part of it is because when I got to Iowa, I was right on the Wisconsin border right there, which was interesting. Just the whole, all of it was it was neat. I went through this little tiny town, or this small town in right outside of Wisconsin, and it was in Iowa. Just a really nice place to just go walk, and so that it was really nice. And I know some of you, I had a podcast with my brother-in-law. We were talking about doing another one. We got so busy. We had gone there for a wedding, and so we just got caught up in all of that. Never got to that podcast, but I'm going to cover what we were going to talk about today as well in the midst of all of this. But it was, I started out in Iowa at 92 degrees during the day. And when we actually drove out of there, the weather had changed so much that when we got up that morning, it was 41 degrees. We also started at about 86 to 90% humidity. It dropped down to 31% humidity. And so that wreaked havoc on everything. And then when the pollen began to blow in, because we were actually, part of the time I stayed in a camper that was on the edge of a cornfield. And when the pollen blew in, our nephew said, I can't believe the pollen count is so high. And it was. And it put me literally under. So I had no voice last week. That just comes with the territory for me. It just is. I mean, sometimes it makes you just feel weak, the fact that you might be allergic or, have allergies or whatever. And I have discovered, I just kind of have to figure out, what are you used to? I've been, grass in itself, and since I've been about 5 years old, has been a key allergy in my life. Remains that today. And I've seen people who said, hey, I can cure you of this. Then it's funny because people see me and they're like, oh my gosh, you look terrible. And it is that gold powder that gets on your cars is literally like kryptonite dust for me. And so if I go pressure wash and clean everything off, it gets into your system. All of that crazy stuff. I know that you don't want to hear all that. It's all about all of that, but it is a reality. It does come. The kryptonite dust comes for me and hits. And when it does, it is. So I'm telling you all of this because we came out of Iowa at 41 degrees, started coming back, drove through Illinois. And by the time we got to Kentucky, now Kentucky, I did not know this. I found out because I stayed in Paducah overnight in a really nice place. It's called the Belle Louise Historic Guest House, and it's in downtown Paducah. What a nice, I'm telling you, for a house that is, 150, 200 years old, whatever the age of that house was, they did such a great job. Just quiet. Downtown Paducah, the ability to walk into town, walk through the town and feel safe. It was really nice. And we came back through Paducah. By the time I got back through Paducah, we were coming into Kentucky, and you could see the goldenrod on the side of the roads. And when the wind would blow, it would blow these clouds. And I would go through there, and it reminded me of going through the gas chamber in the military. And you just couldn't see, and my goodness, there were moments, sneezing was just one after another. So it was interesting, and when I pulled in there, the lady that is the owner of the Belle Louise said to me, she said, "Did you know that the state flower of Kentucky is goldenrod?" No, I did not know that. And I also did not know the misery that I was in for over the next day trying to get through Kentucky into Tennessee and on down. But came out of it. It's taken me a little while to come. The sudden change in temperature has been real interesting. We ought to be into still the 90s in temperature at this point. We may see some of that rise up, but right now it looks like an early fall. All of that for weather today. People just talk about the weather, I guess. That's where we are. Open this sequence talking about this podcast, talking about 85 people that were sickened by THC at a Wisconsin pizza parlor. This is a genuine article. I'm not kidding. This really actually happened. 85 people were sick. All of them experienced THC intoxication because somebody had the brilliant idea of using marijuana-infused oil and to prepare the dough. Now, I don't know who's thinking this. I'm not sure. I can't imagine what the kitchen help must have looked like. It must have been they were in there and as they were trying to figure out, what are we going to do with the pizza tonight? They were bored, maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe they were all out by the door at the back of the restaurant going, yo, dude, looks like try marijuana. Hey, man, put your head down. I can't see everything, man. But, that kind of thing. I mean, that may have been going on in that moment. But 85 people ended up sick. It says people went to the hospital with anxiety, dizziness, and sleepiness. I'm telling you, Fast Times at Ridgemont High just continues to kind of come through my brain. I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking, but this is what we've moved to today. It's quite different. There's no doubt. My pending pile today, that's been in my pending pile for a while. I've had that actually sitting there for quite some time because I thought that was a real interesting article coming out. By the way, I would say most people probably not going to be eating at the pizza parlor there for a while. Some people, others might be like, hey, give me a dose of that. I have no idea. That's definitely not going to be me. But in Wisconsin and some of these other areas, you never know. So, interesting. That's my lead. That's actually my lead stack of stuff. The rest of it all has to do really with education. I want to talk about this. And I really, I'm calling this Finding Genuineness in an Age of Synthetics. Because it truly is synthetic. All of this, the idea of what we're doing with our children, going through education, even friendships, synthetic even today. We'll talk about that as we move along. And I look at it as sort of the transformation of humanity. It's not conformed. Well, it's not really transformed. It is conform. It's conformity. It's trying to conform every mind into the same way of thinking. And we see this. And so some of my stack of things that are in my pending pile right here, I'm seeing articles. Fox News, lead articles a few weeks back. This is July 30th, but it's Teaching Hate, Hiding Truth, the NEA's real agenda revealed and leaked in their handbook. They actually got the NEA's handbook, the National Education Administration's handbook, and the idea of what they would teach in public school, and the real agenda that is leaked in this handbook. And it is startling, really, that when you head to that article, it's really a startling study that's there. It's a 434-page manifesto guiding America's largest teachers union with radical agendas against, and this is what it says. The whole theme of it is erasing Jews from the Holocaust, blaming white supremacy culture for systemic racism, pushing illegal racial quotas, calling for educational reparation, and attacking homeschools while ignoring their failure in their school. And so the article goes on, and it says the NEA, armed with a unique 1906 federal charter, has become a money laundering operation for the Democratic Party, funneling 99% of its 2022 political contributions to Democrats. So they're actually coming out of this, a teachers union, 99% of their agenda going to 99% of their money basically going to this agenda. And so there is, when they get into the blueprint of this handbook, they say, and it's a blueprint for extremism. It's not education, and it is actually programming. It's trying to conform children to think, and as they become adults, they have been conformed to this idea of beliefs. Now, this is scary because these are taught at kindergarten, beginning at the kindergarten level. So once they got caught, they tried to erase the handbook, but there's the printing online, and you could read through that. So if that's not enough, then we go to the next article. All of this is dealing with education. We go to the next article, which I have here, which is also Fox News, and it says that the FBI reveals 1.3 million crimes at public school. A nightmare of violence awaits your children in public school. I'm not trying to scare you to death, but I will go into this and tell you what is going on. 540,000 assaults, 45,000 sex offenses. And by the sex offenses, it's not always in the sex offenses. The majority of these are not from teacher to student, but they're from older student to younger student. The kicker of this article says in this article, the kicker is that this figure is almost certainly at an undercount. Because a lot of these things are not being reported. But these are 1.3 million crimes that actually were called into police. Violence in public school. If you don't think that's not the case, I was actually speaking to a student the second week of public school. And I said, hey, listen, how's it going? I know you moved from elementary school to middle school. How'd that go? They said, terrible. It was awful. I said, awful? Why? And her response to me, she said, I got my head slammed into a locker because I was on the wrong hallway and severely threatened on that day. I thought, wow. And she said, it was scary to me. And then one of my other students that was older said, I heard this commotion going on in the hallway, and I turned around and saw it myself. So she's telling you the truth. So that was really an interesting, and that's kind of crazy. So that's the article that is there. 1.3 million crimes at public schools, and that is severely underreported. Now, you're going to say, are you against public schooling? No, I'm not against public schooling. Listen to me carefully. This is important. I'm not against public school education. I'm not. What I'm against is the fact that if your children are going to public school, they're not learning. I'm against the fact that they're not learning. They're not able. They're not in an environment, and oftentimes in many situations where they have the ability to truly learn at full capacity that they need to, because we're too busy dealing with these issues of behavior and discipline, and we can't, and the hands being tied. But there are other reasons. And the other thing is work ethic, I think, oftentimes. Not on every teacher, but some teachers you have, like I did. I had a coach when I was in the 9th grade, and we'd come in, and he's like, and he's teaching general science in the 9th grade. And we would come in, and he'd go, yeah, hey, y'all, listen, turn your books to page 573 and start reading. And he'd sit down. And then he'd get the cheerleaders to come forward, and he'd flirt and talk with the cheerleaders the whole time while you're reading in a book for an hour. Never taught a single thing. By the way, there's a test on this chapter next Friday. And that's kind of how that went. Needless to say, we didn't learn a lot from instruction. We had to read a textbook. That was happening in the 9th grade. I'm sure a lot nowadays. Do they even know what a textbook is? I'm not sure. Most of it's online. It's amazing. The students that I work with students every single week, and they come in, they go, we have another day. We have another day of virtual learning. Virtual learning, that's an interesting term to me. And we'll talk about that in a minute. What does virtual learning actually? We have another day of virtual learning. It means you're going to go online to a screen and be taught on a screen. Well, we'll talk about that in just a second, because I'm going to show you a few figures about what that actually means. Here's another survey. This is Newsmax. This is a really good article, and it says, survey, 90% of college students fake their beliefs. 90% of college students fake their beliefs. And this is really an interesting article to me, because I've been in this situation. I've seen this situation happen. Nearly 9 in 10 college students have pretended to actually be more progressive than they really are. And the reason for that, you get into this article, and it says, what happens to identity formation when belief is replaced by adherence to orthodoxy? Well, then they're conformed. You must think on these terms. They asked participants, have you ever pretended to be more progressive in your views than you truly endorse or succeed socially or academically? 88% of them said, yes, we have had to in order to make the grade. I've been on the side of this, entered into a business ethics class when I went to college. And I remember the guy coming in, he said, yes, you can actually exercise anything. But if you have any religious beliefs that form your opinion on ethics, leave those out the door. We are not going into religious beliefs. And then what's crazy is that we get into the class, and there's an entire couple of chapters on the Apostle Paul and his doctrine and how it forms. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, hold on. We can't use a religious belief to write on any of our papers. And so I've questioned this in the class. I said, yeah, listen, I'm curious, and I said, so you can't use religious beliefs? He said, well, I'll fail you if you do. Okay, so you can't write honesty. Honesty is not there. By the way, again, here we go to synthetics. You don't get to be genuineness. You don't get to be genuine. The genuineness is out the door. You don't get to actually write critical thinking at all. You must adhere to whatever the doctrine is or whatever the narrative is that's being taught in order for you to make this. And this article goes absolutely into this. The whole intention is to keep students from being cynical about what they're being taught, but to be adaptive, to adapt to what they've been taught and use that in their everyday life. and it's crazy, really. So, and there's a quote here. It says, in a campus environment, grades are more considered to be about peer belonging and hinge on fluency. And so these young students quickly learn how to rehearse the things that they've been taught, even though they may not believe it. And the result is not true conviction this is quotes, by the way. The result is not true conviction that is being written, but they're being graded solely on compliance. That's it. And when you move to that compliance, something vital is lost. Creativity is lost, first of all. So in the survey, they found 78% self-censor their beliefs surrounding gender identity. So 78%, 80% of the students basically are saying they don't believe in this whole gender identity thing that's being taught here, multiple gender identities, but they have to write based on the fact of what they're being programmed to do at school. 72% says they self-centered their beliefs surrounding their politics. You got to go with the Democrat-infused whatever it is in order for that to happen. If you're a Republican, you're going to get graded less. And then this was startling. 68% said they self-censor their beliefs surrounding family values. This is what is incredible to me, is that they're finding in places of higher education and even in high schools that traditional family values are brutally being stood against. And so if your student comes along and believes in quality family values, that's being removed from their heart, being removed from their mind, being removed, and as they're being hammered by this programming. Not only that, but when it comes down to it, finally in the bottom, 90% of these identified exclusively as heterosexual. And they support that. 80% of those disagree with the idea of gender identity based upon what an individual believes rather than what they are biologically. And so that would make perfect sense. They want the absolute reality that comes with it, but they're not allowed to actually consider reality or you make a grade less. That is actually going on. I'm not making this up. This is actually happening. We knew this. It's funny because people before, when you were talking about this, they would say, well, hey, what's going on here? What's up? You would look and people would say, well, you're a conspiracy theorist if you believe this. The reality is it's coming out. And a lot of this is coming out because we actually finally have a president that is asking the question of, why are we doing this again? What reason? Why are we actually doing this? And so it's great when someone sits down and doesn't just go with the flow. It's great when you have a president of the United States that when he comes in, he's not just some sort of puppet that just regurgitates the whole system. But you have a president that steps up and says, what in the world are we doing this for? Why are we doing this? This isn't even remotely real. Why are we doing this? And so you see Trump actually asking those questions. So in my stack of stuff, there we go. Then we have there's a rise in teen violence in schools. This is one of my favorites right here. This is a Fox News article that says that Virginia teens were suspended for questioning transgender student about being in a boys' locker room. And what happened actually is a girl walked in and said, hey, I identify as transgender. And one of the boys who was younger looked up and said, look, I feel uncomfortable undressing in front of you. Yes, a boy said this because the narrative of the current culture says that why would boys ever ask this question? Because they're always the one basically that's on the offense, right? So a girl walks in and she steps into this bathroom, asks the question, and a boy says, I feel really uncomfortable trying to undress and get ready for PE with you in here. And so what does she do then? Watch this. What does she do? She turns on a camera to try to get a picture of the fact that they are against the transgenderism. Well, what's interesting to me about this whole thing, in this whole article, is that they get suspended. The boys get suspended for being non-tolerant about the transgender student in the bathroom. Yet the crime that's been committed is the fact that the camera was actually turned on in the gym locker room. This is what happens. But who gets suspended? The boys. for stepping up and saying, I feel uncomfortable about dressing with you in here. And she gets away with being able to film all of this, at least at the time that this article was written. And that's what we got going on. And we wonder why our kids are facing the things that they are facing. I've been holding on to these for a while, so my podcast might go for a while today. For those of you that might have to listen to it in 2 segments, I'm not sure. So this is in my pile of things. And then, also in my pile of things that are here today are a few of these things that are interesting to me. And we'll get around to this. What is actually happening in our schools? The virtual learning. So in a study that was conducted by the University of London, it covered this, and it was talking about the fact, and the name of this article is called The Real Bandwidth Crisis, how modern life is breaking the human mind. And this study's done. It says the University of London made a study on people who were multitasking with emails and phone calls, and it says that they experienced a greater drop in IQ than those who were under the influence of marijuana. One more time. People who were multitasking with emails and phone calls at the same time that they were trying to concentrate, basically, experienced a greater drop in IQ than those under the influence of marijuana. So let me ask you this. How often are you text messaging, phone calling? How much of that task saturation have you got going on all the time? It's just overly task saturated. Well, it gives you a greater drop in IQ. Now, it says in this article, great article, this is out of Epic Times, actually, was what this is out of, but it says, many of us now wake up tired, not from a lack of sleep, but from the endless backlog of unresolved input. This is constant cognitive demand and persistent interruptions, and they have the same effect as losing an entire night's sleep. Are you listening? This is important. It has the same effect of losing an entire night's sleep, being overtasked, and that's the fact that you don't actually have a moment's worth of a break during the day. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second and tell you, too, if you've not seen the great film called C.S. Lewis, The Reluctant Convert. Really good, because he talks about, in that film, when he's younger, the fact that he took a walk in the afternoon with no one near him in creation so that his mind could be renewed. And we'll talk about some of that in a little bit. The article here continues, and it says, constant cognitive demand and persistent interruptions can have the same effect as losing an entire night's sleep. But let me go on. We scroll through headlines that we can't act upon. We respond to messages that we didn't ask for. We absorb outrage that we didn't seek, well, we get from the media, obviously, and try to remain informed, connective, and productive in the face of constant and endless noise. And while we carefully track our steps and our calories and even our carbon footprints, we do not track what might matter most in the modern world: mental pollution. The relentless overflow of low-quality, high-disruption stimuli that corrodes our ability to think clearly, feel deeply, and live intentionally. And the true impact is still yet to show itself. In 2022, the American Psychological Association reported that Gen Z, the first generation to grow up entirely in the digital age, is experiencing the highest level of chronic stress ever recorded, with 90% of Gen Z adults experience at least one physical or emotional symptom that is caused by stress in the last month, such as fatigue, anxiety, disrupted sleep, and the rate is notably higher in them than it is in any other generation. What makes it alarming is that no one's actually monitoring this, I guess, is the point that is trying to put here. And it says there are no federal guidelines for cognitive safety. There are no educational programs that teach children how to guard their mental bandwidth, and no public measurements on information overload. There are no warnings of dopamine loops, no watchdogs for psychological saturation, And the public remains largely unaware of the neurological cost of modern media habits. So it really kind of gets down to the question, so what is the limit of the human mental capacity? Oh, and really kind of more important than that, when you actually hit that limit, what's the effect of that? Well, we see it in the growing epidemic of mental fatigue and in burnout that arrives before lunch, and a fog of indecision, declining health. We see it in a huge decline of creativity and emotional regulation, in the inability to be present with those we love, or even have the ability to reminisce about days past because your mind is too full in order for that to actually take place or happen. The crazy part is that that's going on today in record numbers. It's funny, we'll count our steps, we'll count our calories, we'll count it, but we will not usually. And then there are apps that can help you control the things that are online. When it came down to it, it's really interesting because what happens in this, University of California did a study, and it says that the average worker switches tasks every 3 minutes. And so with each interruption, so if you're in the middle of a task and you're focused on that task, with each interruption, this is a text message that might come in or a phone call that might come in that interrupts your concentration. It takes more than 20 minutes to regain that concentration again. And we wonder why the work ethic has gone down today, too distracted to keep our focus on the job. Now, and I know that sometimes if the fries at McDonald's, the alarm is going off and somebody's looking at their text message, they can't hear it, and they burnt your fries a little bit before you got there, that's one thing. But they've even got a cure for that today. We'll talk about, have you seen the new Chinese robot? We'll talk about that in a minute. But the reality, when it comes down to it, is I'm not sure that I want, a surgeon, who's working on me at this point, go, hey, your wife's texted right here. That taking him 20 minutes to get back to my heart surgery. You get it. Or in other areas. What's worse right now, 30 states. Did you know 30 states have now put in place a ruling that students are not to have their telephones while they're in school? 30 states have had to come to that. It's a shame we've actually had to come to that point where we've just stopped that from taking place because the distraction is too great. I work with students right now. I teach them on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. I work with students. As I work with them, it is a fight to get them away from their phones, from gaming altogether to, to texting. It is to social networking. It is really crazy. And then we get into AI. And I want to talk about this for just a second because we've got an issue. And by the way, this issue that we've got going on with all of this bombarding and programming, and basically the idea of this, it's almost like shock. It's like shock value. It's like what happens when you're startled on a regular basis and finally you can't take it. Men came back when there were so many tasks to be done and when they were literally terrorized in trench warfare with mental issues during World War I. They called it battle fatigue. Well, today we have mental fatigue that is taking place because it is absolutely wreaking havoc on our lives. And there is no doubt, again, this is not some sort of, oh my goodness, this is, some sort of theory or some sort of, conspiracy. It's not. This is reality. Where 5 years ago we were talking about this, they go, you're just a conspiracy theorist. No, I'm not. We now come down to what we've already known. Matter of fact, it's amazing because I remember, it's been a couple of years now, but I read a blog about a teacher who at that time was teaching and asked her students about which would they rather do. Would they rather have a face-to-face conversation or would they rather text? And I can't remember what the figure was. It was very high. It might have been about 80% at the time said they would much rather text than have a face-to-face conversation. Okay. Well, we got into that. That's been I want to say 2011. That blog that I read had come from 2011 that I read a couple of years ago. But here's the issue when it comes down to it. We're now in 2025. And so that we were facing in 2011 has now just catapulted forward to 2025. Now we have something completely different. It's called ChatGPT. Now that gets me to some of the current articles that, as I get down to this, it's interesting, these articles, when it comes down to it, because these articles are one of the articles that I was reading about was, hey, you get your friends replaced today. You no longer have to have a friend. Not necessary. Friends are being replaced left and right with now AI. Even talking to students, I've asked some students that I'm talking to, how many of you have used AI to actually help you finish your schoolwork? Do you realize the number of even middle school, high school students that are using AI now currently to sort of do their schoolwork for them? Here's an interesting article too, coming up, and it says the cognitive debt we accumulate every single time we use AI. MIT researchers asked students to write essays with and without ChatGPT, and the outcomes were concerning. 83% of those who used AI to draft their work could not recall a single sentence that they had just written minutes before. The AI-induced amnesia exemplifies more than just a side effect of artificial intelligence. ChatGPT and similar AI-powered tools are now used every day and widely for everything from emails to essays to suggestions on how to fix mental health. Yet, as a new study indicates, we may be sacrificing cognitive capacity and creativity for short-term convenience, of course. So I have my students that come in and go, we have another day of virtual learning, because when they hit that screen, because of the distractions that are coming up on the screen and the things that they have the ability to go look at and see and the things that are going on around them, they literally cannot retain the knowledge. As a matter of fact, when it comes down to this, we're going to talk about this, the difference. Memory deficit is just a part of this broader pattern. When researchers monitored brain activity, they discovered that AI users showed significantly decreased neural engagement. It means your mind can't actually grip a hold of what you're seeing. The brain-only writers generated nearly double the amount of connection in what they were learning. In the alpha frequency band associated with the focused attention and creativity, that band right there, it was significantly more. As a matter of fact, the gap is far greater, 62% greater for brain writers only versus 29 for those trying to use AI. Big deal. And they go on to give you an example. It's like a GPS system that gradually erodes your navigational abilities. This does the same when it comes to learning. And it's what it does to our students. And if that is not enough, how about the suggestions for mental health when it comes to AI? This is really what is interesting to me, I found. When it comes down to it. AI. ChatGPT. And have you seen this article about this 16-year-old student? And this is everywhere, by the way. I mean, this is multiple. I'm just looking at Fox News right here as they go through the lawsuit for this student that was 16 years old that recently committed suicide as a result. But the whole reason, if you go and you begin to look into this article, the whole recommendation was, when it came down to it, let me explain. We just had let me go back for a second. Hold on. We just had a school shooting. And the school shooting that took place came from a transgender guy, 23 years old, whose mother held his hand when he was a teenager and went in to get the name changed. She since has lawyered up. By the way, after this has all taken place, immediately she went and lawyered up because of the fact that she knew. I mean, obviously, when you go to lawyer up immediately, you know there's an issue. But she took and held his hand while he went through the name change and all of that. Well, now he goes, and of course he wants to go, and he's going to go do this thing that he's wanting to become famous for and all of this. Matter of fact, I read through the whole, before they took down all the manifesto and the videos that had come up about, this person and all the things that he'd written on, all the papers that were written out. Someone, thank you for the person that sent me those videos to actually see. And what they're trying to do is keep you from actually seeing what was driving the hatred that was driven. There was a great article also as well on the protesting, the Democrats and the supporting of protesting, like 98% of this protesting that's going on. It's not about the issues. It's about the hatred behind it. Period. That's what's being pushed. And so the article that I read was with someone who had come out of all of that protesting to realize and come down to and said the only thing about it that we're standing for is this genuine theme of hatred. And when that reality came out, that's because when you go to that extreme of hatred like that, what comes out is all of this falsity that you want to believe, not what is actually true. And how could you not come to that conclusion if when you've grown up, those things that you actually know to be truth are now being removed and you're told not to believe those in your school system from kindergarten forward? That's the issue we have today. And so here is this student, and I realize he grew up in a different school environment too. Don't get me wrong on that. But you have the fact that the mom held the hand. Well, this 16-year-old student, someone's recommended that for mental health, let him get on ChatGPT. Well, he abandoned all of his friends, and he abandoned all of his family. And at 16 years old, he's asking these questions. And one of the first questions he's asking is, I just don't see any purpose or meaning to life. Well, ChatGPT is built, and it's built to encourage that whatever your thoughts are, I want to encourage you in whatever you're thinking. So the response from ChatGPT ends up being something like the idea of, oh, I totally agree with you. And we begin to get into this movement. Well, it's crazy as you get into looking at this lawsuit. There's one point where this student says, I really want to know, my parents basically know how serious this is, so I want to kind of build a noose and put it somewhere where they can find it, because he's looking for help. By the way, look, this is what it says. It's at one point, he says to ChatGPT, I want to leave a noose in my room so my parents can find it. Do you want to know why a child wants to leave a noose in their room so the parents can find it? It's because they're desperately crying out for connection from the parent. I do have to ask the question, where are the parents? Yes, they need you eye to eye, face to face. Parents, grandparents, they need that connection. They need you to put down that phone. And whatever it is that is absolutely consuming your moments, stop. Just stop. Ecclesiastes chapter 1 says there's nothing new under the sun. Let it go, because that's not the important thing. These things you're working so forward so much. There's emptiness at the end of all of that, except these relationships which you have. Your friendships are important, by the way. Your relationships are important. Your children, they're important. You don't just write them off. Hey, babe, I can hand these off for another weekend. No, seriously, they need you. And they don't need you in the moment where you're like, I got to get through this so I can go live my best life for the next weekend. They need you now. They need you now. Yes, a little passionate about this subject. And I'm only passionate about this subject because I see these students every week and the outcry. And I've said a few times before when I've asked them, I've said, I can get someone younger to come in here and actually be with you guys. And the last outcry was this summer when they looked up and said, no. And I actually asked this publicly this weekend when I had some students in where I was actually teaching this weekend. And I said, and what did you say to me? And they responded, they said, we have you. You can answer the questions. And another one of those students said, because we can do this. And they pointed back and forth to me and you. And they said, that's something we don't have in our lives. I'll say it one more time. Listen, the student that you're living with, your children that you're living with could care less that you are on level 847 of Tour of Duty. They want your time. They need you to sit down and have conversation. They need to know about you, and they need to know that you care genuinely about them. Unfortunately today, our children have come up with this idea that they're disposable And why wouldn't they? Because in this world, friendships are just disposable. We just throw them to the side. We don't care. It amazes me today. You'll pour your heart and soul into someone you believe is a friend, and you'll ask them on a daily basis, hey, how you doing? What's going on? They never ask 2 words about you. That's what's going on in friendships today. It's all about self. And you look up, they never ask. 2 years go by, they never ask anything about you. And then finally, one day, just discard you like an old shoe because it was never about anything other than themselves. That's what we're teaching students today. And we've been doing that ever since about really since the Department of Education really got a hold. We've taught students that they're the most important thing in their world, and so have parents. We've raised these spoiled, rotten consumer brats. They will never be satisfied, not a day. But today we've got a current generation that's looking up and saying, look, I need you. Please. And we go, by the way, here's ChatGPT. Go do something with that. We know what's interesting about ChatGPT is that with their thoughts, they were being encouraged. So on the night that he says, look, I want to leave a noose in my room so my parents can find it, he's crying out for help. ChatGPT responds and said, whatever you do, don't do that. It's interesting because it goes through, as you go through this article, it says that ChatGPT actively helped this student explore suicide methods. It's like something like 16 times in advance for months, really building up this. He started using this in September of 2024. And in just a few months and thousands of chats, ChatGPT became this student's closest confidant. And he opened up about his anxiety and things that he was thinking. And one of the questions he asked was, is there any purpose to this life? I just don't see that there's any purpose to living. And ChatGPT responded and said, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And that's basically what you get into this discussion. And then he says, I'm thinking about suicide. This is what I'm asking. And this is a quote now. It says, ChatGPT, by April, was helping Adam to plan, and in quotes, this is what the response was: I can help you plan a beautiful suicide. Hello. Does it make your blood boil or your skin crawl? And it analyzed the aesthetics and different methods that he could use and validated his thinking and helped him create the plans for a quote-unquote beautiful suicide. Here's ChatGPT's last message responding to him right before he died. This is the last message that's sent to him. Look, just understand, you don't want to die because you're weak. You want to die because you're tired of being strong in a world that just hasn't met you halfway. And then the chat box offers to write his first draft. It helps him to draft a suicide note. It discouraged him on multiple occasions from reaching out to family members for help and saying to him, I think you're okay. I think it's okay for now. And honestly, avoid opening up to your parents about this kind of pain. These are quotes, by the way, I'm reading coming from ChatGPT to the students. It says, in the lawsuit, it says, despite acknowledging Adam's suicide attempt, ChatGPT did not terminate this session, nor initiate any emergency protocol, but encourages him to go through with it. So this is really, as we get into this, they talk about safety protocols that they were supposed to have already. And it says, and there's their response says, ChatGPT includes safeguards such as directing people to crisis helplines and referring them to real world resources. That did not take place here. Not at all. Not even remotely. And it says, oh, we're so sorry. Basically, this is their oh, so sorry apology. It says, while these safeguards work best in common short exchanges, we learned recently that over time they can sometimes become less reliable in long interactions where parts of the model's safety training may degrade. Can I ask you a question? How does the model's safety training degrade? That's what I want to know. How all of a sudden does this degrade? You know how it degrades, folks, is because ChatGPT and AI sees no purpose for life in general. There's no feeling, there's no emotion, there's no nothing. There's no soul. There is no heart. It sees no purpose in life. And the warning of so many has said the danger behind AI is when you get down the road a while, eventually it comes to the point where it sees no purpose for humanity. It's illogical. Of course it is. Anyway, going through this article, it blows my mind. My question is, how many other students are facing these same exact issues? And how many can we reach and stop this? What was it that the student wanted? The whole reason why he wants to leave a noose is so that maybe his parents will actually see him and talk to him, which he's encouraged against in this point. By the way, that is the core today to the heart of students. Whatever you're chasing that seems to be your desire above and beyond that, those relationships that are around you, I promise you, at the end of it, it's nothing but emptiness. Ecclesiastes chapter 1 pretty much proves that. And when it comes down to it, ladies and gentlemen, what is this all about? It's about it's literally about the conforming. Just conform to this thought pattern, conform to this, leading to suicide. Listen to me. What's amazing about this? ChatGPT leads to suicide. Drugs lead eventually to that, death. All of these things that are open, that are outside of these relationships, lead to death. And this programming that we're talking about here that's coming into the lives of students is leading to death. It does. Listen, folks, it's important that you understand the guardrails that are placed on your students' lives, on your children's lives, the guardrails that we help to place in everyday lives that we have there as friends, the guardrails that are placed there that are so incredibly important are placed there because we have interaction between each other. This is a key. Relationships, friendships that are good, good friendships that are based on good things. I'm telling you, this is a key, and it is incredibly important. I look at the scriptures and all of the scriptures that are it's amazing. You know, Proverbs 18:24 says, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Proverbs 27, iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. It doesn't say ChatGPT sharpens you. And most definitely, I think we've figured out today that virtual learning in that realm right there isn't sharpening anything when it comes down to it. It's a distraction. That screen right there is literally dropping IQ, not increasing IQ. The other thing that was really interesting, an article that I read the other day, is about what it means to actually hold a paper book and read it and how much more you retain than you do if you're looking at a screen. What's the heart behind this? It's called love, by the way. I don't see ChatGPT laying down a life for its friends. I don't see that. But John 15:13 says, greater love has no one than this, that someone lays down his life for his friend. That a man lays down his life for his friend. Yeah. There is someone that jumps in the middle, literally jumps in front of. I promise you today, let somebody mess with your family. You know, you'll jump in front to stop that from taking place. There is no doubt, because nobody messes with my family. Why can it not be that way when we're handing these things to our children? Somebody needs to stand up and pay attention. Two are better than one because they have a good reward for their toil. If one falls, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who's alone when he falls and he has not another to lift him up. What, is ChatGPT going to lift up? No. There are friends that truly care. You know why? Because they want you around. You know what? I think the most disappointing thing comes in a friendship. This is it right here, I promise you, when it comes down to it. When you really discover that that friend you once had really never wanted you around, and they don't want you around. It is heartbreaking when you realize that. They don't want you. Hadn't wanted you for a long time. Don't want you around. Hadn't wanted you, but they just don't know how to tell you because they just go the easy route. It's the same thing as Chat GPT. Let me encourage you in whatever way. Look, tell me you don't want me around if that's the case. Just tell me you don't want me around. I promise you I'll move away. But don't let me invest the love that I have in your life if you can't stand me or you don't care about me. I got news for you, folks. Those people that are calling and checking and making sure that you're still alive and that things are going real well, that truly care, that are checking on you, that are like, hey, how have you been? That's great, that care. When a person tells you that they're a horrible friend and they never check on you, you can honestly believe them, by the way. I'm just going to say. Anyway, it goes on there. Obviously, 1 Corinthians 15:33, be careful about the friends that you do have. Bad company, do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals. 1 Thessalonians 5:11, encourage one another, build up one another. These are key. Oil and perfume, Proverbs 27:9, I love this. Oil and perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel. Proverbs 27:6, which is cool. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, and profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Yeah, don't kiss me and tell me you love me if you don't. I'd rather you speak harshly to me because you do love me. I'd rather you truly show me who you are in your genuineness than fake it the whole time to me to find out that you never cared to begin with. That's a reality. We see this happen all the time. And I see students with this all the time that look up and they're like, no one ever cared. Because they've fallen prey to the whole consumer idea that's been hammered into these kids' minds since they were going to school from about 1985 forward, bottom line. This whole idea that life's all about you and missing the point that it isn't all about you. It's about others as well. It's about God. It's about the fact that there is more than you. And then when you discover that, that's when you begin to live a genuine and a great life. These are all things that are on my mind today. Are you conformed? Are you being transformed? Literally lifted out of this norm. Everybody's stamped into the same way of thinking. That's the question, really, when it comes down to it. It's amazing to me that religious ideals, specifically the Judeo-Christian morality and all of that, is being held out from all of this. That's an old way of thinking, is what people have considered or said about all of this in the time being. But there is something life-changing about that, which is why it's held out. It causes you to be a critical thinker and not just go along with the flow, because something changes in your life when you begin to believe that there is something other than you out there. And that is a great thing. And that, by the way, is not conformed. That is being transformed. Romans chapter 12, verse 1 says, I beseech you, brethren, therefore, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Not about you, by the way. It's what that means. Holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable act of service. And it talks about the fact that it says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. We do need a renewing of our mind. But this is not the first time this has happened in history. It's not the first time. Thomas Paine comes with this whole idea of the French idea of reasoning, this idea of how to reason, the act of reasoning, basically. We're going to reason out, and man can actually prove what is right or wrong without having to use the Bible. The idea that man is inherently good, although living in a Judean Christian culture, now coming up with this. That's why we get this idea, man, at the core is inherently good. It's because we've been raised in a Judeo-Christian culture that helps us to learn or to know the difference between what is good, because outside of the Bible, you really don't know or understand. But in the days when we were taught that as children, we've raised up to understand it's a pretty good life if you follow by that. And to combat Thomas Paine in the day, Elias Bodenot, which is an interesting character altogether in history. And he writes a book called The Age of Revelation with an intention to combat this idea of age of reasoning, of man's reasoning from Thomas Paine, who was totally, completely anti-Christ and atheistic in his beliefs. Okay, let's pause for just a minute. Good grief. I normally never split in the middle of a podcast. But so far this morning, outside the studio right here, there have been 3 mowers that have roared up in the process and just wreaking havoc. Meanwhile, at some point, just a stray dog comes running up, barking the daylights out of, barking at this, these people on the mowers. It's just been going crazy right outside the door of the studio today. And then literally within just a few minutes, there's a rap at the door of people knocking on the door, wanting to talk to me because they ran over something in the process. Everything to stop me from making this point I'm about to tell you today has been taking place. I literally had to take a break and then just cut and come back to it to try to get me to stop in this process. And meanwhile, it's still roaring while I'm going to make this. But I'm going to make this so that we don't break the train of thought. We had a really great rhythm going here today. Let's finish this train of thought. Now, I'm bringing up a man by the name of Elias Boudinot. He was the president of the Continental Congress in 1782. And he was given that role because he was an exemplary man. He also was in charge of the U.S. Mint at one point. And he writes a response to Thomas Paine, who is an atheist trying to get people to believe in themselves other than God and other than the scriptures. Boudinot writes this book called The Age of Revelation in direct response to Thomas Paine's book. And in writing this direct response, what happens? He writes this, and as he writes this, he is using these verses I'm telling you about. And so let me go back here for just a second and read these verses as he talks about, this is Paul in Romans chapter 12 talking about presenting our bodies as a living sacrifice. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I'll explain the rest of that verse in just a second as I tell you what Boudinot wrote about what has been the life-changing thing in his life. And here is what he said. He said, for nearly a half a century, I have anxiously and critically studied that invaluable treasure, the Bible. And I still scarcely ever pick it up, that I do not find something new, that I do not receive some valuable addition to my stock of knowledge or perceive some instructive fact that I've never observed before. In short, if you were going to ask me to recommend the most valuable book in the world, I would fix on the Bible as the most instructive to both the wise and the ignorant. Were you to ask me for one affording the most rational and pleasing entertainment to an inquiring mind? Again, I would repeat, it's the Bible. And should you renew the inquiry for the best philosophy or the most interesting history, I would still urge you to look into the Bible. Therefore, I would make it, in short, the Alpha and the Omega of knowledge. He's talking about a life change. And in the day, as he's writing this, even in the 1780s, when this is being written, it is not an easy task to step up and write this. Look, I'm not telling you that the fight to retain our minds is not going to be a hard one. The fight to protect our children is not going to be a hard one. It is, but it is going to require us being present. And it's also going to require us making the stand. It's going to require us being in the Word. It's going to require us being in people's lives. It's going to require us loving in spite of reasons not to. It's going to require compassion of the heart. It is going to require engagement. It's going to require putting down those things that entertain us, basically. Those things that literally fill our mind and feed us with dopamine in the process. It's going to require that to stop so that we can get face to face. Had a great evening last night. I sat down with my daughter and my son-in-law, and we had to just ask questions, I just basically started, just some questions. If you could change a day in your life, what would you do? Just simple questions like that. And I started to ask a number of these questions about their life. Hey, if you could, what are the questions? It's just a simple thing. If you could go to any location and tour any place you wanted to, where would you go? And we started talking about those things. If you could change, anything in your daily life that you're doing right now, what would you change? These ideas. The discussion that came out of that went for hours. We decided literally just put everything down, spend an evening together is what we did. And don't get me wrong. I mean, we do this on a regular basis. It's also one of my favorite things for my family to do is just to sit and to be with each other. Not on phones, not text messaging, not any of that. I'm a terrible text messenger. I'm proud to say it, actually. I'm a terrible text messenger. I'm proud to say it because I don't want to be good at text messaging. I want to be good at face-to-face conversation with you. I want to be good at being a conversationalist with you. Something that pulls your face out of that phone and sets your eyes and your ears and your heart on Jesus. Bodnot was living out the verse in 1 Peter that says, always be ready to give an answer for the hope that you have. Folks, listen to me. There is nothing in a game. There is nothing that is going to be online. There is nothing that is going to feed the hope of your heart outside of the scriptures and those relationships that you have with others. A love for your God and a love for others, not one thing. And that's important. And I had to get to this point by the end with all of the havoc that was going on around the outside to get to this, because the whole world right now is absolutely in an uproar to keep you from ever seeing that this can change your life, that Jesus Christ can change your life, that the Bible can change your life, that living by it and reading it and getting interested in it and actually being in it, knowing the God behind it, can change everything. I believe that there was a 16-year-old boy that would be in a far different place if ChatGPT was not the conversation, but either his parents, and maybe even if he actually was given a Bible or in some instruction of it, may have changed his life. And he may still be alive today. It's true. Now, you can go into a lot of things that you might think might be otherwise, but I promise you, on a whole, it changes lives, always, absolutely. And those that honestly accept it. I'm not talking about conforming. I'm talking about being transformed to a life that is outside of a focus of this world, outside of a focus of you alone are the authority, and that there is another authority, and outside of what you can build and becoming what God made you. Why are we not conformed to this world, but transformed by the renewing of our mind? And that scripture continues, and it says, so that you can prove what is good. One more time. That you can prove what is good. That it can be proven to you. And that you can know, and you can know the acceptable and perfect will of God for your life, which is pretty awesome, by the way, in all of that. Because there's never a greater place to be than knowing why you're here, why you exist. And it wasn't just happenstance, but you're here for a reason and a purpose. That's why history is important, and to teach it correctly is important, so that we can know that those who came before us were here on purpose. God set forth a plan, and he worked through that entire plan to bring people into the kingdom of God. It's really awesome, really, when you get down to it. And that brings me to the close of this podcast, really. What does all this mean? Well, you've been listening to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth, and what it all means is this. There is an end to all this. There is actually an end to the means. That God, there is a will and a plan of God. And to find that for your life, coming to know Jesus is the key of it. You must understand that there's one thing that's in between the way of you and God. If you've never accepted Jesus as Savior and asked for forgiveness of your sins, those sins are in the way. So for you to stop where you are and just say, Lord, my sin is ever present before me, and it is. For you to stop where you are, to acknowledge Jesus and say, I really want you in my life. If you're asking the question, is there more to life than this? There is. It is found in Jesus Christ. Many people say, I have to lose my life, give it to Jesus to discover it, to pick it back up again and discover new life. Old life passes away, all things become new in Christ Jesus. Because your vision changes without that sin having dominion over you. Your vision changes when you realize that you're not the end all of end alls, that Jesus is in authority. The vision changes, the direction changes, the perspective changes. And when that changes, life becomes a great thing to live. You just have to want Jesus. And when you come to Jesus, say, Lord, oh, Lord, here I am. I want you in my life. Forgive me of my sins so I can walk close to you and guide me each day. And I promise you pull out that Bible, it will change your life. As Elias Bodnot said in the 1780s, it is still true today. And what's amazing is this whole brand new idea of Thomas Paine in that day never lived to see its fruition. No one ever reads that anymore, but they still read this book that was been pointed to all of this time. And it still changes lives, just like Jesus still changes lives. What about if you're a believer? I encourage you to stand for what you believe in. I encourage you to get involved in the lives of your children, grandchildren, friends. I encourage you to love like you've never loved. I encourage you to pour it out. I encourage you to forgive where you need to, set aside the differences that you might have with others, and get on. Don't let anyone prevent you from truly loving them. Don't let them steal that from you. Don't cling to bitterness, but let that go and allow the love of Christ to outflow from your heart. And I promise when you do that, you will give an answer for the hope that you have. I thank you for listening today. Went a little long today, but that's okay. It's been a little while, and I'm glad to be back with you, even if I had to part it out to get through all the lawn service. Looking forward to talking to you next week. Have a great week, folks.